Thanks everybody. Thanks for coming. We got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. There's that Slido QR code if you'd like it. So we're going to start in the British Virgin Islands in the late 1970s. Richard Branson, who you may know now as Sir Richard Branson, was on vacation with his girlfriend, and they went to the airport to fly to Puerto Rico. They're in the airport, and they're told that the flight is canceled. There's no problem with weather. It's just the flight's canceled. They don't know when the flight's going to get rebooked, and they're stranded. What do you do? It's late 1970s. You don't have an iPhone to play on or an iPad. Maybe you have a book. Maybe you go and have some food or some drinks. But Richard Branson's not a normal person. What did he do? He called a charter airline. He said, how much would it be to fly to Puerto Rico? They told him the price. He said, how many seats are on the plane? He did some math, and he figured out that it was $39 per seat. So he found a piece of cardboard, and he wrote something on it, and it looked like this. $39, single flight to Puerto Rico. And he sold out the plane. All the passengers went on his flight, and they flew uneventfully to Puerto Rico. Now, why am I telling this story? I'm telling this story because our idea of agility is completely screwed up. Okay? What we think Agile means is dead wrong, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to get us back to what Agile really means. And so we're going to look at several examples. Richard Branson that day was an Agile traveler. Okay, Agile. It's an adjective. It's a simple adjective. It's an awesome adjective, but it's just an adjective. Marked by ready ability to move with quick, easy grace. That's one definition. Clearly, Richard Branson moved with quick, easy grace. He was not stuck. Second definition, having a quick, resourceful, and adaptable character. Quick, resourceful, and adaptable. That's Agile. It's been around forever. Can you imagine someone was Agile hundreds of years ago? Maybe they were quick, resourceful, and adaptable hundreds of years ago. It didn't get birthed on a ski slope in Utah. Folks, you've got to get this out of your mind. You've got to get a lot of things out of your mind. I'm going to try to change your mind about a lot of things today, because this is the journey I've been on, and this is where I am now. Ideally, you memorize this, because we're going to have a quiz at the end. Agile is not this. I call it the happy meal. Sprints, stand-ups, and story points. The happy meal. It is not that. Please stop thinking Agile is some kind of a mixed scrum. It's not. It sure as hell is not this. Okay? It's not Agile Fall. My goodness. It's not even this crazy thing. Scaled Agile. Oh my God, don't get me started. And it's not even this, right? I created this. 2016. We even have a .org. It's all non-commercial. I'm not going to certify you. And this is an attempt at helping us get past some of our ideas about, Agile methodologies. I think it's 4 simple principles. However, that's still not Agile. Example. I wrote about this years ago. It's one of the many stories in my new book, Fast Frugal Feedback from a Feature Fake. This pairs well with Uwe's talk. Did I say that name right? The prior talk? We wrote e-learning software many years ago. Okay, starting around 2006 or 7, we started building our own e-learning software from the ground up. This is a page in our e-learning. Fast forward several years later, lean startup has become a really big deal. I'm in San Francisco at a lean startup conference, and the CEO of Intuit, big financial services company, is speaking. And he's talking about a feature they built into Intuit, which is basically allows customers who are filling out their taxes, right? They're filling out the taxes in the software, TurboTax. And as they're filling out the taxes, they might have a question. And they can have a chat with other users of TurboTax and just chat with each other in real time. And sometimes, different people can help each other. And I was like, that's fantastic. I want that in my e-learning. But at that point, I was a little bit smarter. And instead of building it, I said, let's fake it. Let's fake it. Let's put this fake thing in here. 16 users from 4 countries are online right now. Join the group chat. Guess what? We didn't test drive that into the software. We shoved it in to the template. And then we produced a little bit of code to track some metrics. And then we waited to see what would happen. And if you clicked, this came up. Sorry, we don't have the feature yet, but how likely would you be to use it? And we collected some data. And here's what we found out. Out of 100 people, we took it down after 100 people, saw it. Out of 100 people, effectively only 6 said they were likely to use it. So it's really 6%. That's 43% of 14 who took the survey. So a bunch of people didn't even take the survey, right? And so you could argue maybe my experiment was not good enough. I didn't really, and by the way, I didn't do an A/B test, so I didn't try different kinds of little fake experiments. But it was enough to say, let's not do it. And so we didn't build it. We're part of that, what Randy talked about on the first opening keynote. We used a capital efficient approach to not build a feature fake. Now, if you used it all the time, your users would hate you. They'd be like, oh, I'm not going to click there. That's one of many techniques. There's a book called Testing Business Ideas. Highly recommend that too if you want to learn how to be capital efficient in faking things. But we're focusing on this story for a reason. Why? We're focusing on this story because it is an example of quick, easy, and graceful work, right? It was quick, easy, and graceful to invalidate that feature idea. We were being agile software engineers or agile entrepreneurs at that point. Again, it's an adjective. We weren't sprinting. We weren't doing stand-ups. We weren't doing a methodology. We were simply doing what the friggin' adjective says, to be quick, easy, and graceful. Now, it didn't just happen. I went to a conference. I learned these faking techniques from a woman named Laura Klein, who's a UX expert, right? I had to learn some skills to do this. Okay. Now, Richard Branson, what was he? That day in that airport terminal, he was incredibly quick, resourceful. If you're resourceful, you don't get stuck. You find a way. And he adapted on the fly to do something different. He says that was the birth of Virgin Airlines, by the way. That experience was the birth of what would become Virgin Air. So I wrote a book. It took me about 3.5 years. And it's called Joy of Agility. I basically just wanted to document my favorite stories of agility. And those are some of my stories, my friends' stories. Sometimes there are famous people like Richard Branson and others. And I wrote a whole bunch of stories, and then I had to organize them into parts, because you can't just publish 100 stories. You got to put them into parts. And gradually, it took me 2 or 3 months or more to figure out what the parts were. And lo and behold, out crop these mantras, which I call now, be quick but don't hurry, be balanced and graceful, be poised to adapt, start minimal and evolve, drive out fear, and be readily resourceful. These are the 6 mantras that really emerged. If you talk about evolutionary architecture or emergent design, well, the book kind of followed that approach. These things just emerged out of analyzing the stories and trying to figure out what were they really saying. I now look at these and say, these are near and dear to my heart. Because to me, these mantras tell me what to do. And we're going to get into some of them today. QR code for the book, if you want, you can check it out. You can only pre-order it right now. It's not available yet until February. Now, John Wooden. John Wooden is considered one of the greatest coaches ever. Certainly one of the greatest coaches of the 20th century. If you've never heard of him, I highly recommend you read some of his books. If you've seen Ted Lasso, there's posters and things of John Wooden's wisdom in Ted Lasso's office. Ted Lasso loves John Wooden, apparently. So I've learned more about agility from this man than from anyone in any recent years, okay? Amazing, amazing wisdom about agility. He was a Hall of Fame basketball player and coach. So he's in both the Hall of Fame for playing and for coaching. His team, the UCLA Bruins, they won 10 out of 12 NCAA, that's the National College Association of Athletics, NCAA championships. That's unheard of. It's never been repeated, and 7 of those happened in a row. 7 championships in a row. No one could beat the UCLA Bruins. It was impossible. Best-selling author as well. So he is the one who said this wonderful phrase, and he called it a mantra. So my use of the word mantra is inspired by John Wooden as well. This was one of his mantras. That doesn't mean it was on a poster on the wall. It means that John Wooden used this phrase many times per day with his players. And his players talk about it. Oh, he would say this all the time. Be quick, but don't hurry. Be quick, but don't hurry. Blow his whistle. You were just hurrying. Slow down. Being quick doesn't involve hurrying or rushing or being out of control. That's not what it is. It's smooth, it's calm, and it's controlled. It comes from great skill. Now, Tom DeMarco may be familiar to some of you. This is one of the greatest books written in our field. If you have not read this, it's thin and it's powerful, and I'd recommend you read it. Tom DeMarco said, very successful companies have never struck me as particularly busy. In fact, they are, as a group, rather laid back. This is going to relate to architecture in a minute, I guarantee you, right? Rather laid back. They're not busy. And energy is evident, but it's not the energy tinged with fear that comes from being slightly behind on everything. The companies I've come to admire most show little obvious sense of hurry. Now, can you do some architecture work if you're not always hurrying? And the opposite, if you're always hurrying, are you going to be able to do some evolutionary architecture work? I don't think so. The bridge is always burning. You're always having to rush. You must get to this point if you want to actually be capable Agile architect. And avoid this scenario here, which is the end of a death march. An unfortunate situation. Here's another story for you. Okay? This is HP. You heard of them? Make some printers. Anyone here have an HP printer? Maybe you've had one in the past. I know I have. They have what's called like a new line of printers. So they'll make a new printer, which is an entire new line. It's going to be a bunch of them. And it's the first printer in the new line of printers. You have to make firmware. So they write 2 million lines of firmware for this printer. The project manager gets it into the public hands. Everything's good. Great. Now they make a second printer in the line. Slightly different, maybe slightly better. What do? It needs firmware. Do you take the firmware from the first printer and just modify it so it could work with both printers? Or do you just copy and paste it and then modify the pasted version? What do you think they did? They did the bad stuff. They copied it, and now they had 4 million lines of code. And then they did it 3 more times. So then they had 10 million lines of code. And then they did it 13 more times. So we had here a total of 36 million lines of firmware. I literally taught a course to some of the engineers involved in this mess. And they said, Josh, when we have to fix a bug, it is a disaster. And we have to fix bugs all the time. And we have to fix them all across the code bases, 18 of them. It's horrendous. And that's why I was there to help them learn a better way of working. They were not agile. They were not quick, resourceful, or adaptable. They were hurried, stuck, and rigid. They were the opposite of agile. However, there's a nice ending to the story. And the nice ending to the story is they learned their lesson. This was horrible for them. It was terrible for their market, their customers, terrible. They lost employees because they hated working in this crazy way. And you could say, you know what? They took the quick and easy way, but it was not graceful. Nothing graceful about it. It was very, very ungraceful. You know what one of the biggest problems was? Every single printer had its own project manager who only cared about their little silo, their little world. Didn't care about the larger ecosystem of many printers, the whole printer line. So let's talk about this word grace, because it was missing. Ease and suppleness of movement or bearing. When you're graceful, you have an ease and suppleness of movement or bearing. Bearing's how you behave. Supple means readily adaptable or responsive to new situations. So you see this word grace and adaptable are very, very close cousins. They're very, very closely aligned, right? If you're graceful, you tend to be adaptable. The HP software, the HP firmware was not adaptable. However, they learned their lesson and they said, we're going to create new firmware. And their new firmware, they called it Future Smart. What a great, title. We're going to create firmware that's smart about the future, that's adaptable for the future, that works for many printers. And they did. They started investing in proper software design, in architecture, that led them to be far more agile. And you can read about it if you want to in this book here on large-scale agile development. It's a little old, but the lessons are still perfectly valid. Now, back to John Wooden. Slowing down was essential to this idea he would call quickness under control. Be quick but don't hurry is synonymous with quickness under control, right? They're the same thing. He just used them in different ways. Another story. Back in the early 1990s, I was working at a bank on Wall Street. And Sybase and DB2 had come along, right? It was the relational database world just opened up, and it was like at the bank, we were going to use this a lot. Lots of data going into the relational databases. And this led to lots of different departments all over the bank saying, we need to edit this data, and please help us make an application to edit this data, and blah, blah, blah. Every single department needed a custom application to be able to browse and edit and delete, and you know what that is, right? We call it CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. This is what IT heard. They were smart. They heard, CRUD, 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 CRUD. It's all CRUD. And so when they said, could you make that little application just for me? You know what they said? No, we're not. We're not going to do that. They were smart. They said, we're going to create a generic table maintenance tool. Back then, you didn't have the ability to do that. And we wanted to make something that was, easy to use, good UX, that could edit any data in any relational database. And it was a fun project. I worked very hard on this. What we did was we looked at table data and we said, okay, basically people need to create, read, update, and delete. Awesome. We know about queries. Let's take a query and have it turn into this. This is an insert, right? How could we do that? Well, here's the insert statement. Why don't we just create insert statement like that? We built a little interpreter which could interpret this kind of SQL that we wrote. It was like enriched SQL. And it would take that and it would interpret it and turn it into a dialog box on the fly. So you could basically create a bankroll's create SQL, and you would do one for read, update, and delete. So you'd have SQL, enriched SQL, for all 4 of these. And when it got really complicated, we'd sometimes talk to a stored procedure, because sometimes we had to do some really crazy joins and all kinds of stuff to muck with the data before showing it. But this system worked, and it allowed many different departments all over the bank to CRUD the data. Why do I tell the story? Very similar to the last talk downstairs, Uwe's talk. There's unknown problems and there's known problems. This is a known problem. CRUD is a known problem. We're not weaving our way through the fog. We're not trying to, fix some market, create a new innovative product at a market segment, not knowing if our customers even care. This is a known problem. And so, generic table maintenance was a valuable piece of software. And it was done with big design up front, right? BDUF. It wasn't like we spent 6 months designing the darn thing, but we did do analysis and design. Then we built it and tested it as we built it. I tell this story because I don't believe that there is a one-size-fits-all. I don't believe Agile is just sprinting. To me, Agile is the solution that's going to get me the results I want with the quickest, easiest, most graceful approach. That's what's Agile. And I got to have a whole palette of different tools to use to get me there. Sometimes BDUF is the right answer. Certainly, if it's a known problem, I might look at BDUF. Now, rapid application development. And this is kind of, for me, this is a trip down memory lane here, because we're going way back to the 90s, right? Some of these things blew my mind back then, and I forgot about them. I actually forgot about them. Rapid application development. I read this book in the early 1990s. Now, James Martin said, do you know that Microsoft has spent millions of dollars building Excel? And you can build on top of it. And you can leverage all that stuff they've already done for the right situation. I'm not going to build a fancy trading system on my Wall Street bank in Excel. No. But if you ask for some kind of report that requires some munging of data, I might use Excel. In fact, we did use Excel. We used Excel to get some data out of Sybase, suck it into a spreadsheet, and then we had this Excel macro code. This was before there was VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, macro code, which would take the data, munge it along, do calculations on it, because Excel's pretty good at calculations, and turn it into something that the traders could look at. It was a really cool solution. It didn't take a lot of time. In fact, one of the coolest things ever, I'll never forget this, was that our macro code, which munged the data, we colored it. This was the red code here, this was the green code there, this was the brown code over here. The colors of the code meant things to us. I've never been in a situation where I could color my own code. It was super cool, and it was quick, easy, and graceful. And it was the right solution for that context. It wouldn't have been for others. All right, another principle or mantra from the book is start minimal and evolve. Start minimal and evolve. This is a story from Christopher Alexander, who was an architect, is very influential even in the software field because of the work he did. He wrote a book called A Pattern Language with several other co-authors. And when he built this building in Oregon, it was a student building. And when he said, I'm done. And they said, what do you mean you're done? There's no pathways to the building. And he said, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to put any pathways down. I'm going to see where the students walk. And once I see where the students walk, then we'll put the pathways down. Start minimal and evolve. This is my latest version of a graphic about evolutionary design, or you know, whatever you want to call this, emergent design. That is the beginnings of a guitar right there. You can actually play stuff on it. If you don't believe me, look up Jack Black or Jack White. Did I get that wrong? From the White Stripes, is it Jack White? Jack Black's the actor. Okay, Jack White. Jack White. He makes a guitar with one string and he starts playing it. It's pretty damn cool. Look it up on YouTube. So this is different from Henrik Nyberg's wonderful graphic, which is really more about product development pivots. This is different. If I'm building an insurance application, it's an insurance application here, 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 and here. It's always been an insurance application. It's just very embryonic and primitive here. But it's not pivoting from an insurance app into a car rental system. It's an insurance app. A guitar is a guitar is a guitar. So that's evolutionary design, right? Start simple and slowly evolve. And it's very different from this is what I see in most of the industry. Siloed teams producing components, which later need to get merged together, and it's a disaster. And it's an awful, awful problem in our industry. Yesterday, I attended a meeting of a famous coffee company, and one team was saying, yes, we're working on this and we have no blockers. And the next team, we're working on this and we have no blockers. The next team, we're working on this, no blockers. And I'm like, oh God, they're going to have a disaster when they try to integrate later. And they know this because they keep having this disaster. And they keep not working in an evolutionary way. What I'm trying to get them to do, and hopefully I succeed, is to have a walking skeleton, which again is this. Get them all collaborating across all the teams. I'd actually rather have one team of maybe 12 people, but that's another story. All right, Nielsen, another story. Nielsen is a large monopoly advertising company. They collect data about what people watch. So they're huge. The advertising industry buys that data to figure out where to create commercials and all that other stuff. Nielsen's gigantic, giant monopoly of a company. We went in to help them. And this is one of the best teams I've ever worked with my entire career. Okay, 30-person team. 2 pizzas. No, not 2 pizzas. Sorry. Everyone would be hungry if that was the case. It's exactly not a 2-pizza team. It's a 30-person team. I am so bloody tired of this 2-pizza team nonsense, okay? I'm really tired of it. Because, as I just said, I've been in this industry for decades, and one of the best teams I've ever worked with was 30 friggin' people. And there's more to it than just building software. We were transforming an entire organization. And those 30 people went on to help do that transformation because we trained them to do what we do. So there's more to it than just building software. We're training people in Agile software development. Anyway, this was a giant report, and it had to change. Why did it have to change? Because people's viewing habits had completely changed. Instead of watching live TV, they were now recording stuff all the time. So Nielsen had to be able to say, great, we have 2 sources of data. We have live data and we have recorded data. And the whole friggin' report needed to change, and it's complex math in there. I spoke to one woman, she was a PhD, and she was a product manager, and she's like, Josh, we can't do evolutionary design on the report. Either we have it or we don't. And I was like, not so fast. Let's see what we can do here. So, 30 people, petabytes of data, okay? Large, huge amounts of data. Got to have a data warehouse for that. They also had a mainframe that did a lot of the work. And they had Java developers to glue it all together. What we said was, what's the simplest line in that report? Because we want to produce the simplest first line of the report that's correct, that has data from both sources and the new math, and we'll produce that single line of the report in a week. And we worked with the data warehouse people, we worked with the mainframers, and we worked with the Java developers, and of course the analysts and product managers to produce a single line report, which was mathematically correct. And then we went on to the next vertical slice, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, until we were ahead of schedule and had to pull things from release 2 into release 1. This was evolutionary design for a giant report. And we ended up with a finished report in record time. They won an award for all their work. It was the parent company, which was VNU, gave an award to this particular team for their process improvement. That's evolutionary design. Okay? It works brilliantly. So, drive out fear is the next mantra. And this one's super, super important. They all are. But this is from Edward Deming, W. Edwards Deming. He would say, first of all, if you don't know him, management guru, best-selling author, his book Out of the Crisis is a sort of must-read book. But he would say the leader's job is to drive out fear. I think everyone on the team's job is to drive out fear. Fear slows us down. Fear inhibits our performance. It's not part of any high-performance team if you're afraid. When they were building the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, first of all, for many, many decades, they didn't even think it was possible. So when they finally got a plan together that said, we can really do this, one of the lead architects said, I'm going to make this the safest industrial construction project ever. And he was dead serious about safety. So when they were building the roadway, it's very windy in San Francisco. And when you're high up building a roadway, you can be pushed off. The wind can knock you off. You hit the ocean, you're dead. And so they were a little bit behind schedule. And it was the Depression in the United States. Okay? Very, very, very difficult time. Nevertheless, the architect was able to get $130,000, which was a lot of money back then, 1930s, to get a net under this roadway that was being built. And the net would catch people that would fall in. And I think 16 or 17 construction workers accidentally fell in, and the net caught them and saved their lives. And that net, that safety, enabled them to work faster, and they got back on schedule. And it was basically an incredible safety story. So we look at this as inspiration for what we do in software. Now, drive out fear does not mean this. You could go too far, and you could basically have no risk taking and just try to protect yourself from everything. You're not going to really learn how to skate like this. So I don't recommend that. But we deal with situations in my business where there's a 28-page function right there. That's a 28-page function. I taped it up in a bar, I rolled it out in the hotel lobby, and I filmed it to show to the executives. Okay? It's C++, by the way. It's very, very complicated stuff. It has a state called unknown, and they have no idea how they get into that state. We would help this team, and these people would come to work, and you look at their faces, and they're just dealing with huge complexity. Well, what did we do? We said, you need a safety net. Oh, you don't have any automated tests? Okay. There's like, yes, but we just bought test something or other for $100,000. What's that? Well, it's a record and playback tool. Okay, well, let's automate some of your manual tests. And we record them and play them back. And if you played them back on a different monitor, they would fail. You had to have the right size monitor just to get fragile, temporary scaffolding tests to get a little bit of safety in place. And then we went deeper and deeper, teaching them how to refactor, how to write tests, micro tests, acceptance tests, and so on. And 6 to 9 months later, they shipped a solid version of this thing. And they were no longer that afraid of it. We hadn't completely turned the ship, but we had begun to make a change to this giant piece of legacy code because they were afraid of it. You got to drive out fear. All right, be poised to adapt very quickly. What does this word poised mean? It means marked by balance or equilibrium. If you're poised, you are ready. So when you say poised to adapt, you're absolutely ready to jump. Quick story, IBM WebSphere was chosen by a company in a .com that I worked with in the late 1990s, early 2000s. In fact, that's Kent Beck there in the middle. And he's sitting next to Eric Evans, who wrote Domain-Driven Design. And that's Rob Mee, who was the CEO of Pivotal. If you ever used Pivotal Cloud Foundry, a bunch of us were all on this project together in San Francisco. Alistair Coburn came by to look at it and say, well, that's what you need to make XP work. You need all these rock stars. Well, that wasn't really it. It was kind of like a place for us all to, really learn XP and apply it everywhere else. Prior to getting there, they chose WebSphere. They said WebSphere can do this and this and this and that and the other thing. And gradually it was like, well, it doesn't do this very well, and it doesn't do that very well, and it really doesn't do this well. Doesn't do that well either, but okay, object relational mapping, it does that. It seems to do an okay job with that. So they kept the OR mapping. And then fast forward, we're about ready to go to production. And they find out that the WebSphere license to go into production is a lot of money. So we had a meeting, and most of us said, we'll get rid of it. Give us 2 days. And in 2 days, we wrote our own OR mapping software for that particular application, and we went live. We were poised to adapt. We had thousands of tests that were dependable, and the system was fairly well designed, and we could basically pivot like that. We were poised to adapt. Be balanced and graceful. This is one of my 3 daughters on her unicycle. This is another mantra. We don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but essentially, John Wooden, back to him, would say, if you don't have physical balance, you can't be quick. You got to have balance to be quick. It's an essential part. So it's another one of his mantras, balance. When his players were out of balance, he'd blow his whistle and say, nope, stop. I don't even care if you made the basket, you were out of balance. No good. And then he'd say, to have physical balance, you need to have mental and emotional balance. You need to be mentally and emotionally balanced. Wow. This is a basketball coach talking about mental and emotional balance? He was obsessed with balance, squad balance, rebounding balance, offensive balance, defensive balance, and so on. Now, we look at balance, we say, on a team, we need the right balance of skills. This is us doing mob programming, which we love to do, or ensemble programming. Protection and production is a nice balance. How much time are you spending doing protection work versus production work? If you get it wrong, right? Let's say you do just production work, production, never worry about anything related to protection, you're going to have a catastrophe. And if you only do protection, like that skater, you'll go bankrupt. You've got to find that balance, that parity. So the book is coming out in 2023 in February. 6 mantras, lots and lots of stories, my favorite Agile stories. And if you're interested more in the book, you can go to joyofagility.com. There's different ways to pre-order. So that's that. Thank you.